tears echoed through the halls of the castle. The king's children cried every night, with no one to comfort them. Then she arrived, the new maid. A simple gesture, yet full of courage, changed everything.
Because these children are crying so sadly, I have to go to them immediately.
The king watched in disbelief. The castle would never be the same again. Ancient secrets threatened to surface. Dangerous choices arise at every turn. And now, everything depends on her. What she did could either save or destroy the royal family. The moonlight spilled across the stone floors of the empty corridors, casting long, trembling shadows. From the far wing of the castle came the sound of crying, sharp, relentless, tearing through the quiet like a knife. The king stood at the top of the grand staircase, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. He listened helpless, as the cries of his children echoed through the cold halls. "I don't know what else to do," he murmured to himself, voice barely above a whisper, fingers gripping the railing. Nights had turned into the same endless rhythm of sobs and sleepless hours. He felt like a stranger in his own home, lost between grief and duty. A soft shuffle of footsteps broke the monotony. From the shadows emerged a new figure, a young maid, her eyes calm but curious, moving with quiet confidence. She paused at the doorway, watching the children huddle together in their sorrow, the firelight dancing across her determined face. "I think I can help them," she said softly, almost to herself. Her words were small, fragile, but in the stillness of the castle, they carried the weight of hope. The king turned to look at her fully for the first time, something unspoken flickering in his gaze. Doubt, curiosity, and maybe, just maybe, a spark of something new. The crying continued, but now it seemed a little less endless. The castle's cold stone walls held their breath, waiting to see what this small, mysterious figure could do. The castle seemed alive with sorrow. Every corridor echoed with faint cries, bouncing off the cold stone walls. The chandeliers swayed slightly, though no wind passed through, as if the air itself mourned the queen long gone. Shadows stretched across the hallways, twisting into shapes that reminded the children of her absence. The young maid moved quietly among them, carrying a small bundle of cloth and a few scraps of bread. She knelt by the youngest child, whose tears had soaked through the blanket. "Here, try this," she whispered gently, offering the bread with a tentative smile. The child froze, eyes wide, unsure of this stranger who dared to approach. Slowly, a tiny hand reached out. A small, hopeful sound, a sniffle, a soft gasp, escaped. The maid's gesture was simple, almost nothing to the rest of the world. Yet in that moment it carried the weight of comfort the children had not felt in months. The older siblings peeked from the shadows, watching her every move. Who was she? Where had she come from? There was something in her quiet determination that set her apart from the rest. Even the king, watching from the staircase, felt a flicker of curiosity. For the first time in weeks, the castle's halls seemed just slightly warmer. But beneath the warmth lingered a question, unspoken. Could this newcomer truly hold the pieces of their broken home together? The king sat alone in his chamber, the flickering candlelight casting sharp shadows on the high, stone walls. His eyes, weary and haunted, traced the empty corridors beyond his window. He had once walked these halls with laughter echoing behind him, the queen at his side. Now, only silence remained. He ran a hand through his hair, shoulders heavy with grief. "How did it come to this?" he muttered, voice breaking in the stillness. His children's cries had become a nightly torment, yet he did not know how to reach them. His love was there, buried beneath sorrow and fear, but words failed him. The castle itself seemed to mirror his pain. Vast chambers cold and echoing, tapestries faded, corridors stretching like a maze with no end. The grandeur, meant to inspire awe, now felt oppressive, a constant reminder of what had been lost. Through the window, moonlight touched the marble floors, casting silver streaks across the empty hallways. The king's gaze followed them, lingering on the shadows of his children moving in the distance. He longed to comfort them, yet the distance between them felt unbridgeable. Alone, he was a ruler and a father, trapped within his grief. The children huddled together in the nursery, shadows stretching across the high, dark walls. The eldest, a boy of 10, clenched his fists, jaw tight, refusing to speak. He carried the weight of responsibility too young, a protector of siblings he barely understood. The middle child, a girl of 7, rocked back and forth, eyes wide, murmuring fragments of her mother's lullabies. Memories of the queen's gentle voice haunted her, a reminder of warmth now lost. Every shadow seemed to whisper her absence. The youngest, barely 4, sobbed openly, clutching a faded doll. His cries were raw, unfiltered, echoing in the empty halls like a bell tolling grief. He had no defenses, no understanding, only the endless ache of missing his mother. A small flash of memory crossed their minds. The queen laughing as she tucked them in, her hands brushing hair from their faces. The warmth, the safety, it was gone. Now, each child retreated into their own fear, isolated even from one another, trapped in grief that filled every corner of the nursery. The castle, once a home, had become a labyrinth of sorrow. And in this darkness, the presence of the new maid, though unnoticed, was a flicker of possibility. Tiny, fragile, yet unmistakably there. The maid stepped cautiously into the nursery, her hands empty, but her heart full of intent. "Good evening," she said softly, kneeling a few feet from the children. Her voice was gentle, steady, a contrast to the storm of sobs and whispers that filled the room. The eldest boy glared at her, suspicion etched across his young face. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice sharp. "I'm here to help," she replied calmly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Can I sit with you for a moment?" The middle child hesitated, clutching a blanket to her chest. The youngest peeked from behind, curious despite his fear. Slowly, she offered a hand, an unspoken invitation to trust. From the shadowed doorway, the king watched silently. Doubt and weariness were written across his face. Could this young maid truly reach them where he had failed? His eyes flicked between her gentle gestures and the children's tentative glances. For the first time in weeks, the eldest boy's shoulders relaxed slightly. The youngest let out a small sniffle instead of a cry. The girl's lips quivered, almost smiling. A tiny spark of connection had been struck, fragile but undeniable. The king exhaled slowly, realizing that perhaps, just perhaps, this newcomer might be more than she seemed, and that the walls surrounding his children's hearts were beginning to shift. The maid entered the nursery again, carrying a small basket of toys and fresh linens. Her hope was steady, though her heart weighed heavy with the knowledge of the uphill battle she faced. "Would you like to play a game?" she asked softly, setting the basket on the floor. She knelt, hands open, inviting them without force. The eldest boy scowled, shoving a wooden horse away. "I don't want to play." The girl hugged her blanket tighter, rocking back and forth. "Go away," she whispered, voice trembling. The youngest threw his doll to the corner, shaking his head violently. "No, no, leave me alone." The maid took a deep breath, forcing a gentle smile. "I understand. I know it's hard," she murmured. She knelt a little closer, lowering herself to their level, offering quiet presence instead of demands. Hours passed like this. Soft words met with resistance, small gestures ignored or rejected. Her patience stretched thin, but she did not falter. Each refusal was a blow, yet she stayed, silently promising that she would not abandon them, no matter how long it took. From the doorway, the king's expression was unreadable. Frustration flickered across his features, mingled with helplessness. He had tried everything, and still, the children retreated into walls of fear and sorrow. Yet, something about the maid's unwavering calm drew his attention. Though the rejection stung, a tiny seed of persistence had been planted. Somewhere beneath the scowls, sniffles, and cries, a quiet curiosity began to form in the children. A glimmer of possibility waiting to be nurtured. The cries of the children reached a pitch that made the walls seem to tremble. The king's footsteps echoed through the hall as he strode into the nursery, face tight with tension. "Enough," he barked, his voice sharp, cutting through the sobs. The children flinched, huddling together, wary of his anger and sorrow alike. "I just want you to be safe," he said, softer now, though his hands trembled with helplessness. "Why won't you let me help you?" The eldest looked away, jaw tight, eyes filled with defiance and fear. "You can't. You never could," he muttered, words like knives against the king's chest. The girl whimpered, shaking her head. "I don't want you. I want her," she said, glancing toward the maid, who stood silently to the side, offering nothing but calm. The youngest buried his face in the blankets, tears soaking through, too young to articulate the storm inside him. The king's shoulders sagged. His voice, now almost a whisper, carried both guilt and despair. "I thought I was doing what was best." The maid remained kneeling, quiet, allowing the king's presence to pass without interference. Her eyes met his briefly, calm and steady, almost challenging him to see what he had overlooked. That love and authority alone could not bridge the gap. Patience and empathy were required. For a long moment, the distance between father and children seemed insurmountable. Yet, the faintest hint of possibility lingered in the room. An unspoken promise that perhaps, with time, the walls around their hearts could be softened. The youngest child whimpered uncontrollably, clutching his worn doll like a lifeline. The sobs shook his small frame, and even the king seemed frozen, unsure how to help. The maid crouched low, her voice soft and steady. "Do you want to hear a story?" she asked, holding the doll gently in her hands. The boy blinked, hesitant, his tears catching the firelight. "Once upon a time," she began, "there was a tiny bird who was afraid of the dark. But every night, it found a little light, just enough to feel safe." She spoke slowly, carefully, letting each word settle. The boy's trembling began to ease, his gaze fixed on her face. He leaned slightly forward, drawn in by her calm presence. She continued, weaving a simple tale of courage and gentle hope. By the time she finished, his sobs had quieted to soft sniffles. The king, watching from the doorway, felt a strange stirring in his chest. He had never seen her do anything so ordinary, yet extraordinary in effect. A flicker of curiosity sparked. Could this quiet, determined girl really reach the children where he had failed? The room was still for a moment, filled with a fragile calm. The maid offered the boy a gentle smile, and for the first time that night, he returned it. A tiny, hesitant gesture, but enough to make the king wonder if perhaps the long nights of sorrow could finally give way to something new. Days passed, each one a slow, fragile rhythm of small victories. The maid moved quietly through the halls, carrying baskets of food, blankets, and occasional toys. She hummed softly as she worked, her presence calm and steady. The children began to respond in subtle ways. A shy smile from the eldest boy, a whispered question from the girl, a giggle from the youngest. Nothing dramatic, yet enough to hint that the invisible walls around their hearts were beginning to crack. At the same time, the corridors whispered with scrutiny. Courtiers peered from behind tapestries, eyebrows raised. "Why does the king rely on a mere maid?" one whispered. Another muttered, "She cannot possibly understand the ways of this house." The maid ignored them, focusing solely on the children. She knelt by the hearth, showing the boy how to fold a paper boat, teaching the girl a simple song, holding the youngest in her lap as he played quietly. Her patience was quiet but absolute, her empathy unwavering. From the balcony above, the king watched. Frustration and doubt mingled with a reluctant admiration. Could someone so humble truly bridge the chasm between him and his children? Each small laugh, each hesitant touch, whispered that perhaps she could. Tension in the court simmered quietly, but in the nursery, trust was growing. The maid's presence, so unassuming yet persistent, began to transform sorrow into hope. One small gesture at a time, morning light spilled through the tall windows of the nursery, painting the room in soft gold. The maid moved with quiet purpose, carrying a basket of small toys and scraps of colored cloth. "All right, let's start the day with something fun," she said softly, kneeling to meet the children's eyes. The eldest boy crossed his arms, skeptical, but curiosity flickered beneath the scowl. She laid out a simple game. Paper boats floating across a shallow basin of water, each carrying a tiny note with a joke or a riddle. The youngest clapped his hands, squealing with delight as a boat wobbled and nearly sank. "Try again," she encouraged, laughing softly. Even the eldest allowed a small smile, his fingers brushing water as he guided his boat carefully. For the first time, the girl joined in fully, reciting her riddle aloud and giggling at the answer. Laughter, small and hesitant, echoed across the high-ceilinged room, mingling with the soft morning light. The maid's routines continue through the day. Songs by the fireplace, gentle storytelling before meals, small acts of guidance without pressure. Each gesture, each shared smile, chipped away at the walls of fear and sadness that had built up inside the children. The king, observing quietly from a distance, felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. The maid's gentle persistence was working, reaching the children in ways his authority never could. In these small moments of humor and tenderness, hope began to root itself in the castle once more. The castle buzzed with whispers long before the maid entered the great hall. Courtiers leaned toward each other, voices hushed but sharp. "The king is too distracted," one muttered. "A mere maid cannot guide his children or him." At the center of the room, the king frowned, listening but saying little. His authority felt questioned, fragile, as advisors offered pointed advice about governance and the impracticalities of allowing a servant so close to the royal children. The maid, standing quietly at the edge of the hall, did not flinch. When a particularly bold counselor suggested that the children's behavior reflected the king's failure, she stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "With respect," she said, "these children respond to care and patience, not orders or fear. And they are learning day by day." A hush fell over the room. The audacity of her words hung in the air, yet they carried truth. The king's gaze softened, a hint of gratitude flickering in his eyes. He had never considered that leadership alone might not reach the hearts of his children. Later, in the quiet of the nursery, the maid resumed her routines. Her intelligence was subtle, planning each activity, reading moods, gently guiding the children through emotions too big for their small frames. Her courage was quiet too, but unmistakable. A shield against doubt and gossip, a steady presence in the storm of court intrigue. Even the children sensed it. They followed her lead, trusting her even when the world outside the nursery seemed harsh and uncertain. In this way, she became more than a caretaker. She became a quiet force, capable of bridging not just the gap between the king and his children, but the tensions of the court as well. Night had fallen, the nursery cloaked in shadows that seemed larger and more menacing than usual. The eldest boy sat against the wall, eyes fixed on a dark corner, trembling slightly. "There's something there," he whispered, voice tight with fear. The maid moved closer, kneeling beside him. "I can't see it," she said softly. "Maybe it's only your imagination, but it's okay to be scared. We'll face it together." The girl peeked from behind her blanket. "It moves," she said. Her voice was quivering, small and fragile. "Then let's show it who we are," the maid said, her tone calm but firm. She took their hands, guiding them toward the corner. Slowly, carefully, she illuminated the shadow with a lantern, showing nothing more than a stack of boxes. Relief washed over the children, followed by cautious giggles. Even the eldest smiled, a small but genuine curve of his lips. "It's not so scary," he admitted. The youngest clutched her hand, eyes wide. You're brave," she said softly. The maid's heart swelled, but she remained composed. "You are braver than you think," she whispered, "and you don't have to face anything alone." In these moments, bonds grew invisible yet unbreakable. Laughter returned slowly. Whispers of trust replaced cries. The children leaned into her guidance, and even the king, watching from a distant doorway, felt the change. A quiet bridge forming between the maid and his children, a lifeline of empathy and patience. The castle felt slightly warmer that night, as if hope itself had slipped through the cracks, settling gently in the nursery, promising that even fear could be met and overcome. The king stood quietly in the shadowed corridor, watching through the doorway as the children played together for the first time without fear or quarrel. The eldest boy built a tower of blocks with careful concentration. The girl laughed at a small misstep, and the youngest clutched his doll with a new sense of calm. The maid moved among them with ease, her hands gentle as she corrected a misaligned block, her voice soft but confident. Each gesture seemed effortless, yet profoundly effective. The king exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and admiration stirring in his chest. He had underestimated the quiet power of patience, the strength of empathy. "She's remarkable," he murmured, almost to himself. His eyes lingered on her, noting the subtle grace in her movements, the quiet determination that had begun to shift the rhythm of his home. There was something in the way she smiled at the children, a warmth that was both tender and courageous, that drew his gaze again and again. A flicker of something unfamiliar stirred within him, a pull that was not just admiration, but curiosity. Could someone so humble, so gentle, also touch his own heart? The children, sensing the king's presence, glanced up and smiled at him before returning to their game, their laughter bridging a gap that had seemed insurmountable. The maid's soft encouragement had created a space where joy and trust could exist, and in that space, the king felt the first tentative stirring of hope, for his children and perhaps for himself. In that quiet hallway, the king realized the maid had become indispensable, not only to his children, but to the fragile, wounded pieces of his own heart. A sudden commotion broke the calm of the castle. The wind howled outside, rattling shutters, and the distant clang of the outer gates echoed ominously. A messenger burst into the nursery, face pale. "Your Majesties," he stammered. "An accident. There's a fire in the stables. It's spreading fast." "The children!" The king froze, heart hammering. The children looked up in fear, clutching each other tightly. Panic threatened to take hold, but the maid stepped forward, her eyes steady and focused. "Stay close to me," she commanded, her voice calm but firm. She gathered the children, moving with purpose. "We'll get through this. Together." Smoke began to creep under the doors, the smell sharp and acrid. The king hesitated, torn between his instincts to take charge and the fear paralyzing him. The maid's decisive action cut through his uncertainty. She led the children through a safe passage, shielding them from the smoke, urging them onward. Outside, flames licked the edges of the stables, sparks flying into the night sky. The maid's hands were steady as she guided each child, her calm courage anchoring them in the chaos. The king followed, finally moving with resolve, his admiration for her growing with every step. By the time the family was safe, soot-streaked and trembling but unharmed, the king's chest rose and fell with a mixture of relief and awe. The maid had not only protected his children, but had done so with a skill and bravery that demanded recognition. For the first time, he realized fully that she was not just a caretaker. She was a force of quiet strength, capable of standing firm in the face of danger, and in doing so, had earned not just the children's trust, but his deepest respect. After the fire was contained, the castle settled into an uneasy quiet. The children clung to each other in the nursery, their eyes wide but shining with newfound trust. The maid moved among them, brushing soot from hair and calming jittery hands. "You were all so brave," she said softly. Her voice carried warmth, yet authority, a presence that anchored the fragile calm. The king stood silently at the doorway, watching. He could see it, the subtle changes, the laughter no longer tinged with fear, the way the children looked at the maid with trust rather than hesitation. His heart swelled, mingling relief, pride, and a stirring admiration he could hardly name. Alone later in the chamber, he ran a hand across the banister, thoughts heavy. "Perhaps I've been blind," he murmured. "She's done what I could not." And yet, with such gentleness, outside the nursery, the soft glow of lanterns illuminated the corridors, casting warmth into the stone walls that had long felt cold and empty. Hope had seeped into the castle, small but persistent. Even the courtiers, watching from afar, could not deny the change. The children smiled, the halls hummed with life, and a quiet, resilient bond had formed. The king's gaze found the maid, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, gratitude, and perhaps the faintest hint of connection that reached beyond duty. In the face of danger and grief, a fragile yet undeniable hope had taken root, promising that the family, and perhaps the castle itself, could heal. Late at night, the castle was quiet except for the soft crackle of the hearth in the king's study. The maid stood nearby, tending to the children's supplies before retiring for the evening. The king pored over letters, maps, and cryptic reports sent from distant courtiers. His hand trembled as he unfolded a sealed letter, the wax imprint broken. His eyes scanned the words, disbelief and horror gradually replacing his calm. "It can't be," he whispered. The queen's death, once thought a tragic accident, was now shadowed by suspicion. There were hints of betrayal within the court, whispers of plots that reached even the highest chambers. The maid noticed his tension and stepped closer. "What is it?" she asked softly. He looked up, eyes wide, voice tight. "Something I feared might be true. The queen's death. It may not have been what we believed. There are those plotting against this family, this kingdom." Her expression did not falter. Instead, she met his gaze steadily, mind calculating the implications. "Then we must be careful," she said calmly. "The children, this castle, we have to protect it." A cold dread seeped into the corridors, snaking through the stone walls. The children, asleep nearby, remained unaware of the looming threat, and the king's chest tightened at the thought of their innocence at risk. Every corner of the castle now felt vulnerable. Every shadow seemed to hide secrets. The king ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I thought I was shielding them, that we were finally safe. And now—" His words trailed into silence, replaced by the pounding of his heart. The maid stepped closer, a subtle hand on his arm. "We've faced danger before," she said quietly. "And we survived. We will face this too, together. But we must act carefully. The kingdom, your children, they rely on us both." In that moment, the sense of safety that had begun to take root in the castle shattered. The fire in the hearth cast flickering shadows across their faces, shadows that seemed alive, reflecting the threat now creeping through the very walls of their home. The king swallowed hard, looking at the maid with renewed awareness. She was not just a caretaker or friend. She was a partner in survival, someone whose courage and intelligence could tip the balance between protection and disaster. And as the candlelight danced in her steady eyes, he realized that their journey had changed. The stakes were higher, the danger closer, and everything they had built, the trust, the laughter, the fragile peace, was now on the line. The king paced the study, eyes dark with worry, as the letters and reports spread out like a battlefield before him. The maid stood near the window, quiet but alert, listening to his frustrations. "They're closing in," he muttered, voice tight. "If these plots reach the children, we—" His words faltered, heavy with fear. The maid stepped forward, her gaze steady. "We cannot wait for them to strike. We need a plan, one that protects the children and exposes the conspirators before it's too late." He looked at her, startled. You would risk yourself?" he asked, doubt and awe mingling in his voice. "I would risk anything for them," she said firmly. "For your children, and for the family you are trying to rebuild. But we need more than caution. We need strategy, precision, and courage." Her proposal was daring. Relocate the children temporarily under trusted allies, create a decoy within the castle, and use the rumors and suspicions of the conspirators against them. Every step was fraught with danger, yet her logic was meticulous, her confidence unshakable. The king felt a strange mix of fear and admiration. I did not think you had the mind for such things," he admitted, voice low. His eyes searched hers, seeing not only intelligence but bravery, calm under pressure, a steadfast determination he had come to trust. The children, though too young to understand the full scope, sensed the shift. They clung to her side, feeling safety in her presence, courage in her certainty. Even the eldest boy straightened, eyes brightening with hope for the first time in weeks. The corridors of the castle, once silent and shadowed, seemed alive with possibility. The maid's quiet audacity had changed everything. The king now saw her not merely as a caretaker, but as an indispensable partner. The children began to understand that they were not alone, and the air itself seemed charged with the potential to turn fear into action. For the first time since the queen's death, a spark of control and hope returned. The risk was great, the danger looming, but with her at their side, the family could face the storm together. The king stood in the silent hall, the weight of the castle pressing around him. The night was thick with shadows, the flickering torchlight revealing walls that had witnessed grief, laughter, and fear in equal measure. He watched the maid moving quietly among the children, adjusting a blanket here, soothing a frightened glance there. Every gesture was deliberate, precise, and full of a warmth he could no longer ignore. "She's more than I realized," he murmured to himself. "Not just a caretaker. She's the only one who can keep them safe and keep us whole." The children clung to her, trusting her instinctively, their small hands reaching for the stability she offered. The eldest boy looked up at the king, eyes wide, silently pleading, "Please trust her. She knows." The king's chest tightened. Memories of the queen flashed. Her smile, her hands, the life they had lost. And now, standing in the quiet aftermath of danger and betrayal, he realized that his family's survival depended not only on authority or fear, but on empathy, courage, and unwavering love, the very qualities the maid embodied. "Very well," he said at last, voice low but firm, carrying through the hall. "We follow your plan. You lead. I trust you." The maid's eyes met his, calm but bright with resolve. A subtle nod passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of partnership, of shared responsibility, of something deeper that neither dared speak aloud. Outside, the castle seemed to hold its breath. Every shadow, every flicker of torchlight became charged with potential danger. The conspirators could strike at any moment. Yet within the walls, the family, fragile, wounded, and yet united, prepared to face the storm together. For the first time, the king did not feel alone. The maid was no longer merely a helper or a presence in their lives. She was the anchor, the strategist, the heart that could bind them all. And in that recognition, a fierce, quiet determination took root. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. The stage was set. Danger loomed, stakes were at their highest, and the calm before the storm throbbed with tension, anticipation, and the unspoken promise of courage, love, and survival. The night was torn apart by a sudden clamor at the gates. Flames licked the outer walls as armed conspirators forced their way into the castle grounds. The sound of shouts, metal clashing, and terrified screams filled the air. The king's heart pounded as he rushed to the nursery. "Children," he shouted, voice raw. "Stay inside, stay safe." The maid moved swiftly, her hands steady as she corralled the children into a hidden chamber she had prepared. "Quietly now. Follow me," she commanded, her eyes scanning for every threat. Outside, chaos unfolded. Courtiers screamed, guards clashed with intruders, and the flickering torchlight cast jagged shadows across the stone halls. The castle, once a haven, became a labyrinth of danger and uncertainty. The eldest boy peeked from behind the maid, eyes wide. Are they going to hurt us?" She knelt, meeting his gaze firmly. "Not if we stay together. Trust me." The king arrived, his sword drawn, moving beside her with a mixture of fear and awe. "You've done more than I could have imagined," he said, voice low. "Lead us." The maid nodded, heart racing, and led them through hidden passages and secret doors, guiding the children with unerring precision. Sparks flew from the main hall as combat raged, but within her calm, the children felt protected, their trust absolute. At the castle's heart, she turned to the king. "We can end this now. Draw them into the courtyard where we have the advantage." He swallowed hard, realizing the truth of her strategy. Courage, intelligence, and calm had brought them to this moment. Together, they stepped into the fray, orchestrating each movement, each maneuver, every step a balance of life and death. The intruders faltered under their combined force, the maid's voice directing, the king's presence commanding. Shadows fell, swords clashed, and every heartbeat screamed with tension. Yet in the eye of the storm, the family remained united, the children shielded, and hope, fragile but burning, held firm against the chaos. The night stretched long, every second a test of courage, trust, and instinct. And as the final conspirators were driven back, the castle, though battered, stood resolute, the family intact, their bond stronger than any threat the world could muster. The courtyard was a chaotic symphony of fire, shouting, and clashing steel. The king and the maid moved as one, each step calculated, each decision a matter of life or death. "Left flank, cover the children," the maid shouted, her voice cutting through the roar. She darted forward, using her knowledge of the castle's hidden passages to outmaneuver the intruders. The king swung his sword with precision, defending the main hall, but his eyes never left her. Together, they created a rhythm, her strategy, his strength, a partnership forged under pressure. A spark from a torch ignited hay nearby, sending a plume of smoke into the night sky. The children huddled safely in the hidden chamber, listening as footsteps and muffled cries echoed through the stone corridors. "Watch out!" the king yelled, shoving a guard aside, narrowly avoiding a falling beam. The maid's hands were everywhere, guiding, redirecting, protecting, her courage undimmed by the danger surrounding them. For a moment, the chaos slowed. Their eyes met across the courtyard, unspoken words passing between them. Trust, reliance, and something deeper, something raw and human in the middle of terror. Vulnerability mingled with strength, each drawing courage from the other. They moved again, decisive and relentless. Every strike, every maneuver was precise. Every step, a gamble with lives at stake. Yet even in the face of danger, the maid's calm, the king's resolve, and the children's safety were intertwined, forming a shield stronger than any stone wall. As the last intruder fell, silence slowly reclaimed the courtyard. Smoke curled into the night sky, mingling with the flickering torches, and the king exhaled, chest heaving, eyes meeting hers. The battle was over, but the unspoken bond, the courage, the intelligence, and the trust they had built together, would linger forever. In that moment, the castle was no longer just stone and mortar. It was heart, bravery, and the promise of protection, a fortress strengthened not by walls, but by the unity and heroism of those within. Smoke still curled from the outer gates as the children clung together in the hidden chamber. The king's face was streaked with soot and sweat, chest heaving, eyes wide with both fear and relief. The maid stepped into the center of the courtyard, placing herself between the remaining threats and the children. One conspirator lunged, and without hesitation, she deflected the blow, taking a minor cut across her arm. Pain flared, but she did not falter. "Go now," she shouted to the children, her voice fierce but filled with love. The eldest boy hesitated, worry etched across his face. You're hurt." "I'm fine," she said, pressing a hand to his shoulder. "Stay with your father. You're safe now because we face this together." The king's eyes met hers, a storm of admiration and fear. "Your bravery, it saved them." She smiled faintly, blood staining her sleeve, but her gaze softened. "It's not bravery, it's love," she whispered. "Every child, every heartbeat of the family, mattered more than any danger or injury." In that moment, the children's eyes widened with awe. Trust no longer needed words. They understood instinctively that she would protect them, no matter the cost. The eldest boy stepped forward, placing a tentative hand on hers. "Thank you," he said simply, voice trembling. The king reached them, kneeling beside her. You've done more than anyone could have," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You're part of this family." The courtyard was silent, save for the crackle of embers and the labored breaths of those who had fought. The maid's small gesture, a willingness to face danger for love, solidified the bond between them. Fear melted into gratitude, awe, and the quiet promise of safety. That night, for the first time in many months, the castle felt warm, alive with trust. The maid's sacrifice was not heroic in the grand tales, but it resonated deeper than any sword or strategy. It was proof that love could defend, heal, and unite. The family stood together, bruised but whole, their hearts forever entwined by courage, devotion, and the unspoken truth that they could face anything, as long as they faced it together. The courtyard was quiet now, the chaos replaced by smoldering embers and a cool night breeze. The castle walls bore the scars of battle, but inside, the family was intact. The children peeked from the hidden chamber, eyes wide with awe and lingering fear. The king walked slowly to the center of the courtyard, chest still heavy from exertion, eyes scanning the aftermath. Every overturned torch, every scarred stone whispered of the danger they had survived. The maid stood beside him, hands lightly bloodied, sleeves dusted with ash. Her posture was steady, unwavering, yet her eyes reflected exhaustion and relief. The king reached for her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "You've done more than any of us could have imagined," he said, voice low but heavy with gratitude. "Without you, I don't know if we would have survived. You've saved not just my children, but this family." She shook her head, a small, weary smile touching her lips. "I only did what I had to. They are safe. That's what matters." The eldest child stepped forward, wrapping his small arms around her waist. The younger siblings followed, forming a cluster of warmth and trust. The king watched, heart swelling, a lump forming in his throat. In that moment, he realized the full measure of her importance, not just as a caretaker, but as the heart of their family. She had bridged gaps of fear, healed wounds too deep for words, and now stood at the center of their lives with courage and love that could not be measured by mere titles or ranks. The castle, once cold and silent, seemed alive again. Every hallway, every chamber, held the echoes of bravery, love, and sacrifice. The king felt a pang of sorrow for all they had lost, but also a profound gratitude for what they had gained. A family bound not by blood alone, but by courage, trust, and unwavering devotion. As he looked at the maid, standing tall despite exhaustion, He understood that survival was only part of the story. The true victory lay in connection, in the fragile yet resilient bonds that had been forged in fire and shadow. And in that quiet reflection, the king knew she was indispensable, not just for the children, but for him, and for the life they would rebuild together. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows, casting golden stripes across the polished floors of the castle. For the first time in months, a sense of calm settled over the halls. In the nursery, the children stirred quietly in their beds, smiles playing on their lips even in slumber. The maid moved gently among them, tucking blankets and smoothing hair, her touch tender yet unobtrusive. The king lingered in the doorway, watching. A warmth spread through his chest as he noticed the children's peaceful breathing, the subtle ease in their bodies that had been absent for so long. "Sleep well?" he asked softly, stepping closer. The maid turned, a faint smile brushing her lips. "They've earned it," she replied. Her eyes met his, and in that simple glance, something unspoken passed between them. A quiet acknowledgement of shared triumph and trust. He nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude that went beyond words. "Thank you for everything," he murmured. She inclined her head, eyes bright with understated pride. "It was a team effort, but I'm glad they can rest. That's what matters." The soft laughter of the children began as they awoke, stretching and yawning. The king approached, kneeling to ruffle the eldest boy's hair. The youngest reached out to him, and the girl tugged gently at the maid's sleeve. In these small, intimate gestures, the castle felt alive again, full of trust, love, and the promise of normalcy. As the maid straightened, the king's gaze lingered on her, subtle tension and warmth coiling in his chest. In the gentle light of dawn, amidst laughter and whispered thanks, there was a hint, just a hint, of something more. A connection deeper than gratitude, quietly waiting to grow, as the family began to heal. The evening sun bathed the castle in a warm, golden glow. The children laughed freely in the courtyard, their earlier fears and tears now distant memories. The king stood near the fountain, watching them, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. The maid approached, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked along the castle gardens. "They're happy," she said softly, her eyes following the children's playful movements. "They are," the king agreed, stepping closer. His gaze lingered on her, admiration and something deeper swirling in his chest. "And it's because of you. You've done more than anyone could have imagined, more than I could have hoped for." She looked up at him, cheeks flushed in the gentle light, heart steady despite the warmth flooding through her. "We did it together," she said, voice low. "All of us." For a moment, silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Then he reached for her hand, fingers brushing hers, grounding them both in the moment. "No," he whispered. "I mean you. You've been the heart of this family. I don't just want you by their side. I want you by mine." A soft smile curved her lips, a laugh barely contained. "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied, her hand finding his fully, their fingers intertwining naturally. The children noticed and ran to them, tugging at their hands, laughter spilling into the air. The king lifted the youngest onto his shoulders, spinning gently, while the maid held the others close. In that moment, the family was whole, bound by courage, trust, and love that had been tested and proven. The castle, once heavy with grief and fear, now glowed with warmth, laughter, and hope. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, the king and the maid shared a quiet, lingering look, a promise of a future together, filled with love, bravery, and the unbreakable bond of family. In the end, they had faced loss, danger, and uncertainty, and emerged stronger, united, and ready to write the next chapter of their lives together.